Some stories begin with a scream, others with silence, and sometimes the silence lasts for decades. In 1978, 5 young men vanished into the California night. Their car was found abandoned high in the Sierra Nevada mountains. No sign of struggle, no damage, no reason why they stopped. It was as if they'd stepped into another world. Months later, as the snow melted, searchers stumbled upon something unimaginable. 4 of the men, dead, scattered miles apart in the forest. The 5th was gone. No footprints, no trail, only questions that no one could answer. What made them drive up a mountain that night? Why abandon a working car in freezing temperatures? And why did they split up, one by one, until none survived? People call it the American Dyatlov Pass, a tragedy too strange to fit reason. Some say it was panic. Others blame an unseen force, something supernatural, something waiting in the woods. Maybe it wasn't just fear that night. Maybe it was fate. The forest keeps its secrets. And for 40 years, that lonely mountain has whispered the same unanswered question. What happened to the Yuba County Five? Before we go further, take a moment to subscribe to Mystery Vault 80, where the strange meets the unexplained, and every story hides a question no one has answered. Feel like if mysteries keep you up at night. Drop a comment with your theory. Was this an accident or something beyond our understanding? And share this video, because someone, somewhere, might hold the missing piece. Now, take a deep breath. We're going back to 1978, to a road that led 5 friends into the unknown, and a mystery that time refused to bury. February 24th, 1978. Northern California's Sierra Nevada foothills slept beneath a thick veil of fog. The air was thin, the kind of cold that bit deep into bone. On that night, 5 men, all friends, all familiar faces from Yuba City, vanished into the wilderness without a trace. Their names, Gary Mathias, Ted Weiher, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, and Jackie Hewitt. To their families, they were ordinary young men. But to time, they would become something else entirely, the Yuba County Five. Hours earlier, they had been alive, laughing, celebrating a small basketball victory in Chico. A late-night snack stop, a drive home, and then nothing. No witnesses, no headlights seen, just disappearance. Days later, their car appeared on a desolate mountain road, unlocked, unharmed, parked neatly as if waiting for their return. But they never came back. Searchers found no footprints in the snow, no tire marks, no blood, only a ghostly silence that stretched through the trees, the kind of silence that makes you feel watched. The car wasn't stuck nor broken. It was perfectly drivable. Yet the 5 men, none dressed for the cold, had simply walked away into the night. Why? Some say they were lost. Others claim they were running from something. But when spring arrived and the snow began to melt, what lay beneath shattered every logical explanation. In a deserted ranger cabin miles from the car, a discovery was made. A body, emaciated, frozen, starved. Food and supplies surrounded him, untouched. It was as though he had been waiting for something that never came. 4 others were found scattered across miles of wilderness, each one raising more questions than answers. Tracks that led nowhere, torn clothing, objects placed deliberately as if in ritual. It mirrored another tragedy, far away, the Dyatlov Pass incident in Russia, 1959. 2 worlds apart, yet eerily similar in every way. Strange behavior, unexplainable injuries, and a silence that refused to speak. Was it coincidence or curse? To this day, no one knows what truly happened to the Yuba County Five. Some call it confusion. Others call it madness. But maybe, just maybe, they walked into something far beyond this world. A place where time doesn't forgive. A place where the mountains keep their secrets. February 24th, 1978, Yuba City, California. 5 young men, friends, dreamers, and athletes, vanished into the cold, leaving behind a riddle that would haunt America for generations. Their names were Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Ted Weiher, Jack Hewitt, and Gary Mathias. They weren't drifters or rebels. They were careful, kind, and close-knit, bonded through their love for sports and routine. That Friday night, they drove to Chico to watch a basketball game. It was supposed to be just another small-town trip, nothing more. After the game, they stopped at a convenience store. The clerk remembered them, laughing, joking, grabbing snacks for the road. But what happened after they left that store remains one of the strangest disappearances in California's history. Hours later, their turquoise Mercury Montego was found, abandoned on a remote mountain road 70 miles away, deep in the Plumas National Forest. The road was treacherous, narrow, icy, and dark, far from their route home. The car wasn't stuck. It wasn't damaged. It had gas in the tank. But the keys were gone, and there was no trace of the men. Authorities described the scene as too neat. It was as if the five had simply vanished into the cold. But why would they go there? What or who led them up that mountain? As days turned into weeks, search teams scoured the frozen forest. Helicopters traced the ridges, and dogs followed faint scents that led nowhere. Locals whispered of strange lights seen in the woods that night, flashes of white and green against the dark sky. Hunters later reported eerie echoes, as if voices were calling out, then swallowed by the wind. And then nothing. Months later, when the snow began to melt, a forester made a grim discovery. Deep in the woods, in an old Forest Service trailer, lay the body of Ted Weiher. He had survived for weeks, perhaps even months. Canned food was still stacked nearby. Matches unused. Someone had broken the window to get in. Yet Ted died slowly, wrapped in blankets, beside supplies that could have saved him. Why didn't he eat? Was he alone? Or was he waiting for help that never came? Around the trailer, searchers found the remains of Madruga, Sterling, and Hewitt. They were scattered, as though they'd been running or searching for something. The last man, Gary Mathias, was never found. Only his shoes left behind in the trailer. This mystery bears an uncanny resemblance to another, the 1959 Dyatlov Pass incident in Russia. Both cases involve a group of young friends lost in the wilderness. Both involve strange behavior, irrational, panicked, yet organized. And both left behind a single question echoing through time. What terrified them that night? The Yuba County Five weren't reckless. They weren't lost by accident. Every clue, the untouched food, the missing keys, the unbroken patterns of friendship, hints at something far deeper. Some believe they were chased. Others say they followed a stranger into the woods. And a few whisper that what happened that night wasn't human at all. Even decades later, every theory collapses into silence. Every answer opens another question. The forest keeps its secrets, and some mysteries never let go. The trail that made no sense. By the time investigators reached the mountain road, time had already turned against them. The cold had hardened the ground. Snow covered every trace. But what they did find made no sense at all. The men's car, the turquoise Mercury Montego, was parked neatly on the side of the road. No signs of struggle, no crash marks, and no attempts to free it from the soft snow that surrounded the tires. It wasn't stuck deep. Any one of them could have pushed it out. The key was missing. The doors were unlocked. And everything inside, from food wrappers to maps, looked as though the men had simply stepped out and vanished into the forest. To a detective's mind, that was impossible. At first, police thought they might have taken a wrong turn. Maybe they'd been drinking, maybe a mechanical failure forced them off course. But friends and family quickly shut those theories down. None of the Yuba Five drank alcohol. They were disciplined, structured, and predictable, particularly Gary Mathias, who had a strict medication schedule he never missed. And Jack Madruga would never, ever let anyone else drive his car. So how did that vehicle end up 70 miles from home, up a desolate logging road known only to locals and forest workers? It was as if something or someone lured them there. As search teams combed the wilderness, new clues appeared. A few miles away, rescuers found cigarette butts, snack wrappers, and footprints, several sets, all belonging to adult men. They followed the tracks uphill into denser forest. Then they stopped. No returning prints. No signs of panic or running. Just a dead end in the snow, like ghosts walking into nothing. For weeks, search crews, locals, officers, and even the U.S. Forest Service combed the Sierra Nevada mountains. Helicopters traced the ridges by day, spotlights swept the slopes by night. But nature held its grip tight. Snow, cold, and silence buried every lead. Months later, when the thaw began, hope turned to horror. A forest ranger stumbled upon a service trailer, an old outpost used by the forestry department. Inside, he found the skeletal remains of Ted Weiher. He had survived longer than anyone expected, possibly up to 13 weeks. Canned food, matches, blankets, and fuel surrounded him, untouched. He had neatly folded his clothing and wrapped himself in layers of sheets and coats. But there was no sign of the others. Not yet. Nearby, under brush and snow, searchers found the remains of Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling, just off the road, as if they tried to make it back to the car. Farther away, in another direction, were the bones of Jack Hewitt. Only Gary Mathias, the man without his shoes, was never found. His disappearance completed the circle of mystery. When investigators reviewed the evidence, they found contradictions everywhere. The trailer was 20 miles from where the car was left. Yet the group, none of them dressed for cold, had somehow made that brutal trek in deep snow. They hadn't broken into the trailer until one window was finally shattered, even though the door had been left unlocked. Inside, Ted had rationed food for weeks, but starved surrounded by cans he could have opened easily. It was survival without reason. Then came the whispers. Some locals believed they'd witnessed a light in the forest that night, a blinding flash, followed by strange noises echoing through the pines. Others told of military activity in the nearby area, secret tests, experiments, or something more sinister. To the investigators, it was chaos wrapped in logic, a riddle that refused to solve itself. They followed every path: foul play, exposure, mental breakdowns, even paranormal theories. But every clue only deepened the void. If you're still watching, ask yourself, what could drive 5 grown men, smart and cautious, into the frozen wilderness without food, coats, or reason? Drop your theory in the comments, because at Mystery Vault 80 and Dark Truth 25, we don't just tell stories. We uncover what's buried beneath them. Like, share, and subscribe if you believe the truth of the Yuba County Five still lies hidden in those mountains. Theories, secrets, and shadows, universal. By the time the investigation reached its peak, the Yuba County Five case had already become one of America's strangest disappearances. 5 young men, all friends, all part of a local basketball team for adults with learning disabilities, had driven into the Sierra Nevada mountains and vanished without reason. When the first bodies were found months later, law enforcement thought the mystery was finally over. But the evidence told a different story, a story that refused to end neatly. First came the question everyone asked: why were they there? The road they took, a rugged, isolated path into the Plumas National Forest, wasn't on the way to anywhere they needed to be. In fact, it was the opposite direction from their route home. No one could explain what had led them so deep into the wilderness. Even stranger, the car had been left in perfect working condition. Tests showed it could have been easily driven out. The wheels weren't stuck. And yet, they left it behind, walking into the cold. Why? Detectives began exploring theories, each one more unsettling than the last. Theory 1, they were chased. Some investigators believed the men had encountered someone on the road, a stranger, maybe several, and panicked. Maybe a confrontation led them to flee on foot into the mountains. But there were no tire tracks other than the Montegos. No footprints leading to the car. Nothing to suggest pursuit. Still, witnesses nearby reported hearing a yelling that night, echoing through the forest. And others swore they saw flashlights in the distance, as if a search or chase had already begun before the official one ever did. Theory 2, they were lured. Some family members thought the men might have trusted someone, perhaps an acquaintance offering help or a ride. The area was used by loggers and government workers, and some suggested the group followed another car, believing it would lead them home. But no one else was ever identified. No witnesses. No vehicles reported missing. Just an empty road and silence. Theory 3, military or government involvement. Conspiracy theories grew quickly after locals began reporting strange sounds and flashes of light in the forest the same night the 5 men disappeared. The nearby mountains weren't far from military testing areas, and rumors swirled about secret operations or gas experiments gone wrong. But despite requests from investigators, the military denied any activities that night. Still, for decades, some locals have whispered about unmarked trucks seen moving through the woods in the days that followed, and unexplained radio interference near the search zone. Coincidence or cover-up? They got lost. It sounds simple, too simple, but it's the official explanation many have settled on. Maybe they took a wrong turn, panicked, and became disoriented. But that theory collapses under scrutiny. None of them were reckless. They had full gas, food in the car, and the road wasn't blocked. And when their bodies were found, they were separated by miles, scattered in directions that didn't align with survival instinct. Lost people moved towards shelter or roads. These men moved away from them. And then there's Theory 5, something or someone broke their minds. Gary Mathias had a known history of schizophrenia, though he'd been stable for years under medication. Without his pills, could paranoia have taken over? Could he have convinced the others to follow him into the freezing wilderness? Police considered it, until they realized the others had left without their coats, without flashlights, without food. It was an organized exit, not a delusion-driven panic. And besides, if Gary was the cause, where was he? Why was his body never found? Even more puzzling was what Ted Weiher's body revealed. He had survived the longest weeks, maybe months, in that service trailer. He'd grown a beard, meaning he had endured for some time before succumbing to starvation and frostbite. But inside that same cabin were materials that could have easily saved him. Canned food, fuel, heat, clothing. He had even wrapped his feet carefully, as though he was trying to preserve his body for rescue. Was he waiting for someone? Was he told not to move? Why did he die, surrounded by everything he needed to live? The evidence, in every way, feels wrong. A car that wasn't stuck. A cabin stocked with supplies. Men found in opposite directions, each separated by miles, as if driven by different reasons. Whatever happened that night, in February 1978, defied explanation. The mountains kept their silence, and the forest refused to answer. What do you think happened in Yuba County? Were they victims of a crime, or witnesses to something they were never meant to see? Leave your theory below. Every comment helps us piece the puzzle together. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to Mystery Vault 80 or Dark Truth 25, where every story we tell is a step closer to understanding the shadows the world forgot. Like, share, and turn on the bell, because the next chapter uncovers a lead most people have never heard about, one that might change everything. Weeks turned into months before the first signs of the missing men emerged. It was early June when a group of motorcyclists exploring a remote logging road near Plumas National Forest stumbled upon something chilling: a deserted Forest Service trailer, half buried in snow. At first glance, it seemed abandoned. But inside, investigators found something that froze the entire county in disbelief. There, lying on a bed under a stack of neatly folded sheets, was the body of Ted Weiher, one of the missing 5. He was emaciated, his beard grown long, evidence that he had survived for weeks, maybe even months after disappearing. His body told a silent story of desperation. Despite being surrounded by canned food and fuel, Ted had slowly starved to death. Investigators noted that someone had broken into the food storage shed and consumed a portion of the supplies, yet much of it remained untouched. Why hadn't Ted eaten more? Why hadn't he lit the propane heater just a few feet away to stay warm? The trailer was fully equipped. It could have sustained them for months if they had used the resources correctly. But it seemed as though the men had been too frightened, too confused, or perhaps too obedient to an unseen authority to do what was necessary to survive. Outside the trailer, faint footprints suggested that more than one of the group had made it there alive. But the rest had vanished into the wilderness, leaving behind only fragments, torn sneakers, rusted flashlights, and scattered bits of clothing buried in the snow. Forensic experts would later confirm that 3 more of the men, Madruga, Sterling, and Hewitt, had died of exposure in the nearby woods, their remains partially consumed by animals. But one man, Gary Mathias, the one who suffered from schizophrenia and relied on medication, was never found. His shoes were in the trailer, but he was gone. Had Gary wandered off in confusion? Or had he somehow survived, escaping into the vast wilderness never to be seen again? Some whispered darker theories that Gary had turned violent, or that someone else was with him that night, leading the group deeper into danger. The scene at the trailer only deepened the mystery. It was as if the men had been deliberately kept alive, rationing food, organizing supplies, but waiting for permission to act. Permission that never came. The Yuba County Sheriff's Department called it one of the strangest cases we've ever seen. To this day, that snowbound trailer stands as a symbol of unanswered questions, a silent witness to a mystery that refuses to melt away. In the next chapter, we explore the strange psychological profiles and theories that have haunted this case for decades, from cult connections to government experiments. The Yuba County Five case has spawned countless theories, each more unsettling than the last. What began as a tragic disappearance has evolved into one of America's most baffling psychological and criminal enigmas. Investigators, journalists, and armchair detectives have wrestled with one question for nearly 5 decades. Why did 5 young men drive up a snowy mountain road that night, a place they had no reason to be? The first theory centers on Gary Mathias, the one member of the group who was never found. Gary was a U.S. Army veteran who had suffered from schizophrenia but was reportedly stable with medication. Some believe Gary may have experienced a psychotic episode that night, convincing the others to follow him into the wilderness. But those who knew him insist he was doing well and would never endanger his friends. The second theory points to a more sinister possibility, that the men encountered someone on that mountain, maybe a person they trusted, or perhaps a stranger who led them off course. Some say they were chased. Others speculate that they were herded away from their car by force. Witness reports surfaced of a red pickup truck tailing the group near Oroville that night, but the driver was never identified. Then there's the chilling cult theory. Around that time, Northern California was seeing an increase in small survivalist and doomsday groups operating deep in the forests. Locals whispered about hidden compounds, strange rituals, and men in white robes seen along remote trails. Could the Yuba Five have stumbled upon something they were never meant to see? Psychologists studying the case suggested shared delusion, a rare phenomenon where a dominant individual's paranoia spreads through a small group. But this doesn't explain the disciplined behavior in the trailer. The rationed food, the folded sheets, the unlit heater. That wasn't chaos. It was control. As for Gary, his disappearance remains the most haunting detail. His shoes were in the trailer, a sign he might have swapped footwear with Ted before venturing out. But no trace of him has ever been found. No remains, no belongings, nothing. Every recovered clue seems to contradict the last. The car's location, the lack of damage, the careful use of resources, and the scattered remains all point in different directions. It's as though the truth itself is fractured, hidden beneath layers of panic, fear, and perhaps something unnatural. Even now, decades later, retired detectives revisit the case files and admit they're no closer to understanding what really happened that night. The Yuba County Five didn't just vanish from a mountain. They vanished from reason itself. The families who never stopped searching. For the families of the Yuba County Five, the story didn't end in 1978, it only began. While the media moved on, mothers, fathers, and siblings were left trapped in a cycle of grief and disbelief. Each day brought a new theory, a false lead, and the cruel hope that maybe, somehow, their boys were still alive. The Mathiases, Madrugas, Sterlings, Hewitts, and Weirs became reluctant public figures, their private pain broadcast on national television. But behind the cameras were kitchen tables covered in maps, newspaper clippings pinned to walls, and radios tuned to police frequencies. These were ordinary people forced to become investigators, haunted by the feeling that someone, somewhere, still knew the truth. Ted Weir's mother never forgave the system. She would sit for hours, staring at her son's military medals, whispering, "He didn't deserve to die like that." Jack Madruga's brother said it best. 5 men don't just drive up a mountain and vanish. Someone made that happen. Gary Mathias's stepfather, Bob, became the most relentless voice for the group. Even after the discovery of 4 bodies, he refused to believe Gary was gone. He organized search parties long after the official investigation ended, hiking through the mountains himself, calling Gary's name into the silence. The families were united by tragedy, but divided by theories. Some believed the men were victims of foul play. Others thought they became lost and panicked. A few even clung to supernatural explanations. The mountain's curse, the ghost stories that locals whispered about the snow-covered wilderness. Every anniversary brought pain, and sometimes new torment. People mailed letters claiming to have seen Gary Mathias. A psychic once told Ted's mother that her son had been taken to Canada. Others called pretending to have answers, only to vanish once more into the ether. But despite the years, one truth became clear. The Yuba County Five were never forgotten. Their names became a symbol of how fragile the line is between safety and disappearance, between an ordinary night and the unknown. And for the families, time didn't heal. It only deepened the mystery. Every unopened case file, every unanswered call, every memory frozen in 1978 remained like a wound that refused to close. Some of the parents went to their graves still believing their sons were out there, cold, lost, and waiting to come home. Others accepted death, but not the story the world was told. Even now, decades later, the surviving relatives still gather each February. They light candles, share old photographs, and ask the same haunting question, not where the boys went, but why. The Dyatlov connection, 2 mysteries, 1 shadow. In the vast, snow-covered wilderness of California, 5 young men vanished under chillingly strange circumstances. But halfway across the world, in the frozen Ural Mountains of Russia, another mystery had already written its legend. The Dyatlov Pass incident of 1959. 9 experienced hikers died under bizarre and violent conditions. Tents ripped open from the inside, bodies scattered in the snow, strange injuries, and radiation that defied logic. The Soviet government's investigation concluded with a single phrase, a compelling natural force. But for decades, no one truly believed that. When a Yuba County Five case hit American headlines in 1978, journalists couldn't help but draw comparisons. Both groups were young, healthy, and familiar with the outdoors. Both ventured into the cold wilderness under unclear circumstances. And in both cases, fear seemed to strike before death did. What linked them wasn't just tragedy, it was pattern. Abandoned vehicles, perfectly functional, left behind as if in panic. Food uneaten, supplies untouched, and signs of sudden, irrational behavior. Bodies discovered miles from safety, some sheltered, others exposed to the unforgiving cold. In Dyatlov Pass, the hikers had fled their tent half-dressed into a snowstorm. In Yuba County, 5 men drove up a mountain in the dead of night, seemingly without reason. 2 events, separated by time and continent, but tied by something darker. Human behavior that defied explanation. Some researchers began to suspect a psychological link, shared panic, mass hysteria, or even a kind of environmental trigger that induced disorientation and fear. Others turned to conspiracy, secret military tests, chemical exposure, or unknown atmospheric forces. But then came the more unsettling thought. What if both groups encountered something or someone that night? Something powerful enough to drive them into chaos, something no one would ever believe. Even the geography held symbolic weight. The Feather River Mountains of California and the Urals of Siberia. Both remote, both cloaked in perpetual cold, both places where the line between the living and the lost grows thin. And just like the Dyatlov hikers, the Yuba County Five seemed to leave messages behind. Not written but felt. Unanswered questions frozen in a landscape. A warning that we still haven't decoded. Decades later, historians, Reddit detectives, and forensic analysts have pored over every parallel. Some call it coincidence. Others call it fate. But when you look at the photographs, the empty camp, the broken glass, the frostbitten footprints, it's hard to shake the feeling that both groups walked into the same kind of mystery. Maybe not the same mountain, not the same time, but the same force. One that hides in the wild places, waiting for those who wander too far. Theories, secrets, and the men in the woods. By the time investigators pieced together the last movements of the Yuba County Five, nothing made sense, and everything seemed possible. The case files read like a web of contradictions, and even now, each theory feels like a fragment of truth hidden beneath layers of confusion and fear. Let's begin with the most unsettling theory of all, the human element. Several witnesses from that February night in 1978 reported seeing a red pickup truck tailing the men's Mercury Montego as it sped through the backroads of Oroville. Others claim to have seen two vehicles on that same route, one blocking the other. Could someone have chased them? Were the five men running from an unseen threat? A stranger, a group, or someone they knew? There were whispers of locals with bad intentions, of a confrontation gone wrong in the mountains. A man named Joseph Shones, who was stranded in the snow that night, told police he saw flashlights outside his car, several figures moving around, one woman holding a baby, others silently watching him. When he called for help, they vanished into the darkness. That description has never been explained. Then there's the survival theory. Some investigators believe that the men, lost, cold, and scared, were simply trying to survive after taking a wrong turn. But how does that explain their perfectly capable car being abandoned? Or the half-mile trek to a Forest Service trailer stocked with food, blankets, and propane, supplies that could have saved them? Inside that trailer, rescuers found canned food opened with a knife, blankets neatly folded, and signs that someone had survived there for weeks. But the mystery only deepened. Why did they never light a fire? Why didn't they try to signal for help? And why did only one of them make it that far, while the others died scattered across the frozen hills? Some say they panicked because of mental distress. All five men were known to have mild developmental disabilities, making them vulnerable under pressure. But their families reject that explanation. These were responsible men who held jobs, loved sports, and had plans for the future. They didn't just wander into death. And then came the whispers of cover-up. Rumors spread that the U.S. Forest Service and local law enforcement withheld crucial evidence. Files went missing. Maps were changed. A private investigator hired by one of the families claimed that certain documents had been sanitized before public release. Some point to military connections. The Plumas National Forest had long been used for secret training exercises. Strange lights were reported in the sky that same weekend. Could the men have stumbled upon something they weren't supposed to see? Something that required silence? Others still reach for the supernatural, invoking parallels with Dyatlov Pass once again. Whispers of infrasound, disorienting frequencies that can cause panic, dread, and hallucinations. Some even claim to have found radiation readings near the trailer site years later. Each theory explains something, but none explain everything. Every clue seems to double back on itself, like footprints in snow erased by wind. What really happened to the Yuba County Five? Were they chased, lured, or simply lost? Or did something older and colder, something that doesn't belong in our world, claim them that night? No matter which theory you believe, one thing remains chillingly clear. Five young men vanished in plain sight of civilization. Their bodies were found, but the truth never was. The aftermath, families, fear, and the silence that followed. When the final search parties left the Plumas National Forest, they didn't just leave behind footprints in the melting snow. They left behind unanswered questions, fractured families, and a community that would never feel whole again. For the mothers and fathers of the Yuba County Five, every phone call, every knock on the door was a fresh wound reopening. They'd hoped for a rescue, not recovery. And when the news came, it wasn't with closure, it was with confusion. Ted Weiher's mother fainted when she learned how her son had died, starved to death inside a trailer filled with food. One of the men, Jack Madruga, had been found clutching his car keys as if he'd intended to go back, to bring help, but never made it. Gary Mathias, the only one whose body was never found, became both the central mystery and the scapegoat. Newspapers ran headlines that alternated between sympathy and suspicion. Some reporters painted the five as slow, odd, or mentally unfit. Others suggested darker narratives, that they were running from something or someone, or that one of them, perhaps Gary, had turned on the rest. But the families fought back hard. These weren't unstable wanderers. These were sons, brothers, and friends. Men who loved basketball, who looked after each other like family, who had plans for the very next day. They had tickets to watch their favorite team and food pack for the trip. They were ordinary young men, until that February night turned them into a legend of fear. The police investigation wound down, but the families never stopped searching. They visited the site countless times, retraced the routes, spoke to loggers, hikers, even truckers. Each lead turned to dust. The authorities quietly moved on, but the parents couldn't. Some even believed someone was watching them. Phone clicks during calls, anonymous letters, cars parked across their homes late at night. Whether paranoia or something real, the fear was constant. Years passed. Yuba County rebuilt its routines, but locals whispered about the five boys whenever the mountains were mentioned. The site became a grim pilgrimage. Hikers and armchair sleuths visiting the remains of the trailer, picking through old cans and relics like archaeologists of tragedy. Then came the internet age. In the 2000s, true crime forums reignited interest in the case. People from around the world, from California to Kyiv, began connecting the Yuba County Five to global mysteries like Dyatlov Pass. Parallels were drawn. Groups of young people, lost in wilderness under strange and fatal conditions. Some theorized coincidence. Others whispered about patterns that defy explanation. To this day, Gary Mathias remains officially missing. Every few years, someone claims to have seen him in Oregon, Montana, even Canada. None of those sightings ever pan out. His family, aging and frail now, still holds on to a small hope that maybe he survived, or at least that his story will someday be told truthfully. The Yuba County Five are buried in different cemeteries, their graves marked with simple headstones. No shared monument exists, though some in the community have called for one. They deserve more than silence. And yet, that's what remains. Silence. The same silence that hung in those snow-filled woods when the searchers packed up and drove away. But silence, in this case, speaks louder than anything else. It's the sound of mystery unresolved, and of questions still echoing through the canyons of Northern California. The legacy of fear, what the Yuba case taught us about the unknown. Decades after that cold February night in 1978, the story of the Yuba County Five still refuses to fade. It isn't just another case file gathering dust in some police archive. It has become something larger, more unsettling. A cautionary tale of how ordinary lives can vanish into extraordinary darkness. By the early 2000s, the internet had given birth to a new kind of detective, the digital sleuth. True crime forums, Reddit threads, and YouTube documentaries began dissecting every photo, police report, and weather map tied to the case. People who weren't even alive in 1978 now debated theories, as though they had been there in those snowy mountains themselves. Why did five young men, all close friends, all mentally capable of understanding danger, drive into a frozen wilderness with no jackets, no snow tires, and no map? Why did they leave a warm car, stocked with fuel and food, to walk nearly 20 miles into freezing temperatures? Some blamed confusion and fear. Perhaps they panicked after getting stuck in the snow. Others proposed more sinister explanations. A forced detour, a chase, or even a meeting gone wrong. What makes this case so haunting isn't just the lack of answers. It's the presence of too many possibilities. The FBI had looked into Gary Mathias' mental health, noting that he'd suffered from schizophrenia and had once gone off his medication. But those who knew him swore he wasn't violent and that he loved his friends deeply. Could someone like that have turned on the others? Or was Gary himself a victim, perhaps lured away or taken? Then there's the evidence. fragments that contradict every logical explanation. The car was found with the keys missing, yet unlocked. The men's shoes were found miles apart. Ted Weiher's body showed signs of slow starvation, despite canned food just a few feet away. And in that Forest Service trailer, one single candle had burned for hours, surrounded by untouched supplies, as though someone had waited for rescue that never came. To this day, no consistent timeline explains how the group got separated, how they ended up in such remote terrain, or why only 4 bodies were ever recovered. Even seasoned detectives call it a case that mocks investigation. But perhaps the most enduring mystery is not how they died, but why they went there in the first place. Yuba County residents still whisper that there's a secret reason behind the detour. Some claim the men stumbled upon an illegal activity in the woods, possibly drug trafficking or military testing, and were silenced. Others, inspired by the eerie similarities to the Dyatlov Pass tragedy, think something unnatural was at play, a phenomenon, a sound, or a force that caused panic and disorientation. And yet, through every theory, every documentary, every forum post, the truth remains frozen, just like the night they vanished. Still, this mystery gave rise to something important. It changed how missing persons investigations are viewed in America. It forced local police to collaborate with the FBI more closely, to consider mental health in their search strategies, and to never dismiss strange reports simply because they sound unbelievable. It also shaped pop culture, inspiring books, podcasts, horror films, and countless online debates. The story of the Yuba County Five is no longer just a tragedy. It's become a mirror reflecting our deepest human fear, that sometimes we can vanish without reason. Even now, if you visit Plumas National Forest, locals will tell you the mountains don't like to give up their secrets. Travelers have reported hearing faint voices at night, whispers that seem to echo the same words. Help us. Whether that's imagination or something else, no one knows. Echoes in the snow, the unending mystery of the Yuba County Five. There are cases that close neatly, confessions, convictions, and clear answers. Then there are those that linger, echoing through generations, refusing to be silenced. The Yuba County Five belongs to that second kind, a mystery frozen in time, wrapped in silence, and buried beneath layers of snow and sorrow. 40-plus years have passed since that February night in 1978. Families have grown old. Investigators have retired. Yet, the question remains the same. What really happened on that road, and why did 5 young men never make it home? Each of the 5 had dreams. Jack Madruga, the quiet, loyal one, proud of his car and always ready to drive his friends. Ted Weiher, the kind soul, known for his compassion and patience. Bill Sterling and Jack Hewitt, cheerful, inseparable, lovers of sports and good jokes. And Gary Mathias, the most mysterious of all, whose disappearance remains unresolved to this day. The tragedy of their story isn't just in their deaths. It's in the unbroken chain of confusion that followed. Why were their remains found scattered across such vast distances? Who lit that candle inside the trailer? Why were provisions untouched? And why were their clothes switched among the bodies? Every fact points to another question. Every clue opens another void. In 1979, the official investigation ended. No foul play suspected. But locals never accepted that answer. To them, something far darker happened that night. Perhaps a meeting with strangers. Perhaps something that terrified them into the woods. Perhaps a secret that someone, somewhere, still guards. Over time, this story became part of California folklore, whispered around campfires, retold on late-night radio, discussed on YouTube channels like this one. And as each generation discovers it, the fascination only deepens. The Yuba County Five case has been compared to the Dyatlov Pass tragedy for good reason. Both involved young people in remote, frozen landscapes. Both ended in inexplicable deaths. Both left investigators haunted. And both remind us that nature and fate can swallow truth whole. But perhaps there's another layer. Something spiritual. Something about the fragility of control. How one small choice, one wrong turn can unravel everything we understand about safety and sanity. If you stand today on that lonely stretch of rural California, the wind feels colder, sharper. Locals say it's not just the weather, it's the memory. A memory of voices carried by the pines, of headlights cutting through the fog, of laughter that turned into screams. And somewhere, maybe Gary Mathias still walks in those woods, a restless spirit searching for the way back home. The Yuba County Five may never receive justice in the way most cases do. But in a strange way, their story has become a warning, a living reminder of how easily people can vanish and how deeply the unknown still rules parts of our world. So as we close this journey, let's remember, not every mystery was meant to be solved. Some are meant to remind us of how fragile we are in the face of fate. In the heart of the Sierra Nevada, time seems to hold its breath. 5 souls, lost between logic and legend, still wander the cold ridges of memory. The Yuba County Five, a name that feels like a question no one has answered. Were they victims of panic, of circumstance, or of something unseen that night in 1978? Something that waits in silence and darkness, far from reason's reach? The facts don't align. The patterns don't fit. Even decades later, the pieces of this puzzle refuse to form a picture. And perhaps that's what makes this case so haunting. Not just what we know, but everything we don't. The forest keeps its secrets. It swallowed their voices, their fear, and their final moments. But it also left behind clues, traces of something stranger than any rational mind can accept. Some say they were running from an unseen force. Others whisper about government experiments, mistaken identity, or supernatural intervention. But maybe the real mystery lies in the space between what we believe and what we fear. As we close this chapter, remember, not every mystery is meant to be solved. Some are reminders of how fragile our understanding truly is. And somewhere in that frozen forest, the wind still carries the same question through the trees. What really happened to the Yuba County Five? If this mystery left you thinking, wondering, or questioning, join us at Mystery Vault 80, where we explore the shadows between truth and the unknown. Feel like if you believe some stories never truly end. Comment your theory below. Was it panic, conspiracy, or something unearthly? And share this documentary, because someone out there might see what we've all missed. Don't forget to subscribe for more mysteries the world still can't explain, from lost civilizations to vanished people and everything that defies reason. Until our next journey into the unknown, keep your mind open, your lights on, and your curiosity alive.